First, you write the 11 points which I have made up today. The first stage of religious life, conceptualized or discovered or underlined by sociologists, can be called totemic clans. Totemic clans in tribal communities of the world and Durkheim calls it moral communities. Moral community. This is the earliest or the simplest form of religious life. In Durkheimian terminology, this is the elementary form of religious life. What is it? Totemic clans. Totemic clans make the most simple moral community or religious community on earth. Now come to the second point. Cults of the ethical teachers versus cults of the shamans or magical cults. Cults of the ethical teachers versus cults of shamans or magical cults. I'll explain this once I give you the 11 points. Third, agricultural revolution, birth of cities, and widespread social unrest regarding distribution of wealth, status, or rank and power. This point has been studied primarily by Max Weber, and it was supplemented or complemented by Marxist theorists of religion like Brian Turner. This is the third stage, Now the fourth stage. The third stage produced the social need of the fourth point, legislator prophets, which I was talking about yesterday. Had there been no third stage, there would have been no fourth stage. Therefore, it is interdependent. The first two are interdependent. First is tribal community, pastoral people, shifting cultivation. And then we have totemism. But once, the human society or tribal society moves forward from pastoral or shifting cultivation, pastoral, economy and shifting cultivation to settled agriculture, it produces some sort of agricultural revolution, although in sociology of religion it is known as the axial age, AXIAL, axial age. This axial age or agricultural revolution is accompanied by birth of cities and widespread social unrest regarding distribution of wealth, status, and power. But in some societies, the status is called rank. Therefore, the status is equal to rank. It led to the development of legislator prophets, and the examples of legislator prophets are Zoroaster or Zarathustra of Persia, and Moses, the Israeli prophet Moses, who is regarded as the founder of Jewish religion. Now, this development of legislator prophets led to birth of prophetic religions or world religions as we know it. Durkheim will call both the tribal moral community and world religion as church. Now, once the fourth stage had been developed in society, we have the fifth stage. That is world religions or prophetic religions on one side and magical cults on the other. And magical cults on the other. And sixth, church versus sects. Church versus sects. But since we have sects at a later stage also, we are calling it sects of Abrahamic religions. Church versus sects of Abrahamic religions. Then we have seventh stage, industrial revolution in Europe. May I ask you, when industrial revolution took place in Europe? Anybody? Pardon? Do you know there have been two industrial revolutions in Europe? Industrial revolution in Europe, 16th century. And this industrial revolution took place in Catholic countries, you see. And the countries are Spain, Portugal, Holland or Netherlands. These are three front runners of the industrial revolution of 16th century, seconded by France and Italy. Now, this seventh point led to division in the European Christianity, and you come to the eighth point, that is Catholic Church versus the Protestant sects, the European Reformation of 16th century. Luther, Zwingli, Z.W. Zwingli and Calvin. 16th century Catholic Church versus the Protestant sects, European Reformation of 16th century, Luther, Zwingli and Calvin. And then the ninth point, this is terribly important, but I do not know whether you are sociologically aware about it or not. Counter-Reformation. Have you heard about Counter-Reformation? You must have heard about Reformation, But have you heard about Counter-Reformation? Counter-Reformation took place immediately after the Reformation of Luther, Calvin and Zwingli. They were opposed by the Catholic kings and emperors in Spain, Portugal and Holland, but also in France and Italy to some extent. It is called Counter-Reformation. It was also a ferment of ideas, you see. In case Luther and Zwingli and Calvin, they are debating the papacy, that is the Catholic Church and its bureaucracy headed by the Pope. In the same way, the Counter-Reformation interrogated the theorists of Reformation, the theologians of Reformation. There was little critique of Luther, Zwingli and Calvin. And your textbook says that Reformation was triumphant, but it was triumphant only in 18th century. For 200 years, it was a balance almost in favor of the Catholics and Counter-Reformation. As a result, what you find that is, Counter-Reformation uh, in Catholic countries, and point 9, Counter-Reformation in Catholic countries, and colonization of non-European countries. The whole of Latin America was colonized by the counter-reformation countries. Are you getting the point? The whole of Africa was colonized by these are Catholic people who are colonizing first. Are you getting the point? The Catholic people of Spain, Portugal, Netherlands or Holland, they are colonizing Latin America, they are colonizing Africa, they are colonizing North America, and they are also colonizing parts of Asia. Are you getting the point? Unless and until you understand the counter-reformation, you will not be able to understand the missionary zeal or hope or enthusiasm of the missionaries associated with the Catholic Church who are under attack in Germany, France, Switzerland, and England. Are you getting the point? Therefore, you have got a very partial picture of the European Reformation and Counter-Reformation. And unless and until you know about these things, you will not be able to understand theory. Okay, then 10th point, Catholic Church versus the cults of the saints, mystic cults. 11th point, Industrial Revolution in 18th century. The second industrial revolution in Europe. The industrial revolution in 18th century, England, France, and later on Germany and Russia. These are 11 points directly related to the history of religion from Western perspective. Leads to the 12th point, the state, church, and market. Now, in case you have this table of 12 stages of the development of religion, you will be able to make sense of the ambiguities in the public discourse in India. For example, Indians think that from 1947 to 1990, the public discourse in India as well as the academic discourse in university is centered around secular politics, fundamentalism, superstition, black magic, and religion is painted as some sort of devil or black thing, and what is white? Secular is white. Now, as I said earlier, there is nothing wrong in it. This is fine, okay, normal. Because this has been the human nature to paint the other as devil, black, This is human tendency. And since academicians and politicians are also human beings, therefore I'm not alarmed. But I will just make one sentence. They are culturally illiterate people, even though they have the degree of MSc or PhD. They may be educated in language, secular language, but they are culturally illiterate people. They do not know what they mean. Because, Europe has never been secular. Europe has never been secular. Number one. And secondly, even there have been secular groups. But group is one thing, community is other, nation is another thing, nation state is the fourth thing, and society is the fifth thing. There is also difference between society and civil society. Are you understanding the nuance of the intellectual discourse? There have been secular groups in Europe, but there has been no secular society in Europe. Never. Not even for a second. Secondly, secularism doesn't mean the same thing in every country. Once the space or time changes, the meaning also changes. Now, second misunderstanding of Indian scenario is that people think that market came in India only in 1991 after liberalization. This is not even foolishness. Because even fools should have some dignity. This is nonsense. Had there been no market before that, then what Max Weber was talking about? When he was saying that Prophet Muhammad emerged because he was from the merchant class. And it is widely well known that, he married a older widow, Khadija, who was very rich. And he was almost 25 and she was 40. Therefore, it was a political marriage, And Max Weber said, although I do not agree with him, but just for the argument's sake, he says that he was trying to convert his wealth, his newly acquired wealth through marriage into power. In Indian term, he wanted to upgrade him from Vaisya to Kshatriya, warrior class. I think it is very simplistic argument of Max Weber. But what he is trying to say is terribly important. He is saying that market existed before Moses. Fully developed market existed 2500 years ago. This is terribly important. His interpretation about Moses or Muhammad, Buddha or Socrates may be flawed. Are you trying to get the point? He is saying that market existed much before the modern market. Now, what he said is terribly important, that religion and economy and religion and state, religion and economy on the one side and religion and state on the other, or religion and polity on the other, are as much integral to sociology of religion than merely magic, science and religion. Okay? And secondly, you cannot say that there has been unilinear evolution. You cannot say that there has been unilinear evolution where you have, magicians, and then the religious teachers or prophets, and then you have scientists. Rather, he says that in every society, all the three may be found simultaneously, but relatively speaking, in comparative perspective, one may be predominant and the other may be subordinates. Therefore, in a society dominated by science, there will be magical elements, there will be religious elements, but they may be subordinate to the scientific element. In the same way, in a society predominantly religious, in modern sense of the term, there will be magical element and scientific element. But they will be subordinate they will be subordinate to the religious element. In the same way, in a society which can be classified primarily magical, there will be religious element and scientific element, but the magical element will be predominant. This is his ideal type. This is his ideal type. Okay? Now, which book to read about the state? There are many books, but in case you ask me today, uh, I will recommend you 4 books. Earlier was suggestion, friendly suggestion. This is recommendation. Slightly coercing, In case you wanted to understand contemporary state, Ralph Miliband, state in a capitalist society. In case you wanted to understand a state which is called secular state, which emerged in Europe after the French Revolution. You should read a book very famous. You must have heard the name, but may not have read the full text. Niccolo Machiavelli, The Prince. The Prince by Machiavelli. This is a book uh, which is secular book about the state in India. And third book which I will recommend you to understand the Indian state is Kautilya's Arthashastra. Kautilya's Arthashastra. But none of the books are sociological. They are the most profound books in their own right about different states found in different societies. In case you ask my favorite, and this is neither suggestion nor a recommendation, certainly not prescription, this is just sharing my thoughts like you share on WhatsApp. What I read whenever I find a particular type of a state problematic. Anand Kentis Kumar Swami, Spiritual Authority and Temporal Power. Spiritual authority and temporal power. This gives you an overview of the history of a state. There have been 2 types of a state where the ruler was sanctified, given sacred status because he was or she was very impartial. In case you wanted to understand a just king, a just monarch, a just queen, none of the books mentioned earlier, including that by Chanakya or Kautilya, will help you. Because there is no comparative perspective in Prince, Arthashastra, Ralph Miliband, or any other. For example, Max Weber has also written about the state. Now, in case you are interested in the secular state also, Kumar Swami is terribly important. Therefore, this is the first book which I read whenever I have some doubts about the political order anywhere in the world. I am not saying you should read it. This is my sharing, because this is the last lecture in the first section. Second book, which is already prescribed in your textbook, is J.P.A. Suberai, Religion, Civil Society and a State, a study of Sikhism. Religion, Civil Society and a State, a study of Sikhism. This is a good book This is a good book, and he has been my teacher. I like him, but he doesn't like me because you know he doesn't like criticism, and I am a very argumentative teacher and argumentative student. I am a fighter, and I think that once you fight, of course, with ideas, then it will give you a new world. It is very very fascinating because it will break your mindset and inhibitions. It will give you a newfound freedom to experiment on the world. The problem with JPS Subera and his book will be known to you once you read it because it is described that he doesn't understand modern Europe, although he was educated in England. Therefore, he had seen only the bright side of England, European modernity. And he had understood the bright side of European modernity as an Indian, as a Sikh. Therefore, in case Max Weber's understanding is colored by his upbringing, the same may be true about Indians writing about Europe as well. My prejudice is not better than your prejudice. And even if it is not prejudice, it is at least the limitation of the language you are using to describe something. Are you getting the point? His problem is that he understands only science and he is uneasy when he encounters art. And we have always debated who is the most important person to provide password to deconstruct European modernity. He will say Newton, I will say Shakespeare. He said, where is science in Shakespeare? I will say, not in the narrative, sir, but in the set design of the play of Shakespeare, in the body language of the actors. After all, is there any Christian in the class? You have seen Jesus Christ anywhere? He is not a straight. His head is, which side, left or right?
On this right. On Jesus Christ's right.
Homework. Homework. Then you have seen, is there any Hindu student in the class? You will say, what a stupid question. Most of students are Hindu in the class. Of course, some people are Hindu or Muslim or Christian by birth. But, according to sociology of religion, there are always two births. One, the natural birth, second, the cultural birth, which is called baptism in the Semitic religion. Baptisma in Islam. And it is called Dvij among the Hindus. Dvij, twice born. For the first time, you are born from the womb of your mother. And the second time, you are born from the womb of your teacher. Who is a Savarna? Who has been born from the womb of the teacher. Therefore, have you ever encountered who is the god or goddess of knowledge? Ganpati and Saraswati. But have you seen any temple dedicated to Saraswati? Any temple dedicated to Ganpati? How Ganpati looks like? He looks like a pregnant woman. A pregnant woman had a stomach, you know. Ganpati had also this. The concept of zero figure is not equal to beautiful man or woman in India. Now, what I wanted to stress is that you see, I have already given you the formula. Take the second stage. First stage is totemic glands. I have tried to make you simpler in the class, and I have also suggested you new kinds of book. Let us come to the cults. What are cults and how they function? You know, cults appear in this 12 formula uh, schema twice. One before industrial revolution and once after industrial revolution. Cults. Cults are point two in your schema, and then uh, cults are actually they appear thrice. Fifth, church versus cults, and then you know Catholic Church. Point 10, Catholic Church versus cults of the saints. Therefore, there are three types of cults. There are three types of cults and there are two types of sects. Okay. Now, let us come to first. I must give you the definition of sects and cults, and then I will come to this. You please make a note. Sects and cults are regarded as deviant. Sects and cults are regarded as deviant in relation to a wider cultural or doctrinal context. Sects and cults are regarded as deviant in relation to a wider cultural or doctrinal context. Point first. Second, sects tend to promote intra-group solidarity and personal identification with the group. Point 3. Cultic Kaji groups, Kaji or Kasi, they are not fully developed groups, they are partly groups, they are incomplete groups. The cultic Kaji groups, some people pronounce it Kasi groups, do not systematically encourage group cohesion and explicit sharing of ideas. I am repeating, cult, cult, cultic Kasi groups do not systematically encourage group cohesion and explicit sharing of ideas. Next point. A cult is a Kasi religious group that has different and unorthodox ideologies with distinct rituals and practices and is headed by an authoritarian and charismatic leader. A cult is a Kasi religious group. This is Quasi. It is pronounced in two ways, Kasi and Kaji. A cult is a Kasi religious group that has different and unorthodox ideologies with distinct rituals and practices, and is headed by an authoritarian and charismatic leader. Last point. In the history of religions, we find an interplay. In the history of religions, we find an interplay between sectarian heterodoxy and churchly orthodoxy. In the history of religions, we find an interplay between sectarian heterodoxy and churchly orthodoxy. Now, to sum up the last point, the concluding point, there are many, but I'm trying to finish it today. The last concluding line in this section will be: a sect is a small group. A sect is a small group that separated from a larger group to follow a different doctrine. While a cult is a small Kaji religious group with very unorthodox ideology, rituals, and practices. A sect is almost always a branch of a certain religious organization, while a cult is a totally different organization. Members of a sect, members of a sect live in mainstream society, while members of a cult usually live in isolation. While members of a cult usually live in isolation, away from their families who are non-believers. Cult members are cult members are usually completely obedient and dependent upon their leader, while members of a sect are not. Some sects have been widely accepted. Some sects have been widely accepted and recognized by other religious groups and most governments, while most cults are not. Next sentence in the same last concluding. In post-Reformation Catholic Church, tolerance of orders of priests and monks had constituted a form of institutionalized sectarianism, that is, or in brackets, The incorporation within the official conception of variations on and near departures from doctrinal orthodoxy. Now, let us come to the table again. What we find is that in the beginning, human society was primarily tribal society. Please remember, this is Western perspective about the religion, history of religion. When we come to India, we will have different set of authors who will give you slightly different view. The first stage is the stage of tribal communities. Among the tribal people, we have totemic clans, totemism, the religion which is known as totemism. Please remember what you have listened to so far, not in my class, but in your life. Those who follow Jesus Christ are called Christians, and their religion is called Christianity. Those who follow the teachings of Muhammad are called Muslims, and their society is called Islamic society, sociology of Islam, sociology of Christianity. Okay? Because when sociologists were writing, they had the wrong data. What was the data? That Christianity is the largest religion of the world, followed by Islam. Therefore, whenever they are dealing with Christianity and Islam, there is some reverence. Therefore, they will never call Christianism Islamism. Once they call it, they are dubbed communalist. Okay? But exclude these two terms, Christianity and Islam, and you have Judaism, because they are minority. Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Parsis from Iran, those who came to India or went to Europe because they did not want to follow Islam, which was, the invader religion in Persia, are a minority even in India and other places. Therefore, Zoroastrianism. Okay? Then you have Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, as if there are only two religions, Christianity and Islam. And others are political ideology. And the foolishness is this: instead of making a critique of sociology of religion, you will find many foolish Hindus defending Hinduism. They are saying that we are not a religious people. We are political ideologues. Now, once it is a political ideology, then there will be different points of view. Are you getting the point? Therefore, first you must understand, never use in your term paper or in the end semester exam, because I am very particular about it. Use similar terms. In case you are writing Christian, write Hindu, Zoroastrian, Judaic. And in case you are saying Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, tribalism, there is problem. Confucianism, what do you mean? Use similar terms for similar objects. There should be some intellectual honesty. Postmodernism, what is this ism business? You are not studying or making a critique seriously. You are indulging in propaganda. Are you getting the point? Therefore, please do not do this. Give respect to all the religions because they deserve respect. Use similar yardstick, similar language, similar criteria, similar, taraju to weigh. And then see, in my opinion, all the religions are structurally, in Levi-Straussian term, similar, but they are suited for different type of temperamental people. Equality doesn't mean uniformity. This is the argument of Claude Lévi-Strauss and Lévi-Strauss. These are not equal. 5 fingers are not equal, but it doesn't mean that one is less important than the other. Are you getting the point? Therefore, there can be, for example, diamond and coal. The size of the diamond may be small, it doesn't mean it is less costly, less valuable. But it doesn't mean every costly thing is very useful. Therefore, Marx has 2 concepts: use value and exchange value. And you need not be a Marxist to use the Marxist term. You need not be a Buddhist to use the Buddhist term. You need not be a Christian to use the Christian term. You need not be a Muslim to use the Muslim term. I have no difficulty in using any language, including the secular one. What I have learned and what I wanted to share, not teach, is that in any moral community or ethical community or religious community, there is complementarity of right and duties. In case you want your right, you must perform your duty. In case you are not performing your duty, you have no right. This is religion. And what is non-religion or so-called secular? I have only rights. Don't talk about my duty because this is my personal freedom. They have every right to paint a whole community or society in black. But the moment you make a mild criticism, they will say, no, don't be personal. Why? Why the person is more important than the group or the community or the society? You are a brutish, selfish person, you should be killed. You are making a critique, lethal critique of the whole community, whole nation, whole society, and you think you are sacrosanct because in your opinion you are a great intellectual. This is bullshit. Religion doesn't tolerate this. Durkheim calls society sui generis. It is autonomous. It is meaningful in its own right. And you cannot use the scale of another society to judge the other society. Are you getting the point? And use appropriate term. For example, Hindu religion is not, a real description. In so-called Hindu religion or in the so-called Hinduism, what they do, they try to study, even if they are positive, religious groups like Saivism, which is again wrong because they are Saivites, not, they worship Shiva and they make a moral community. Then they worship Vishnu and his incarnations and they are Vaishnavites. But the religion is not Vaishnavism. Therefore, either you use Vaishnava Dharma, Saiva Dharma, Shakta Dharma, okay, or you use neutral term like Saivites, Vaishnavites, not ism, because ism connotes political ideology. A person may be deeply religious but may not be political. Are you getting the point? And a person may claim to be very spiritual, but he may be very, very selfish individualist. You will, and therefore, although it is sadly written, not a very well written book, but and I also do not like the author, but the book I recommend. Make a critique, but it will give you some food for thought. The name of the book is God Market. It is written by a very famous author, Meerananda. I do not like the book, but I have always prescribed this book to my MPhil and PhD students. Therefore, in case you want to interact with me, never try to please me because I will be very angry. In case you wanted to have dialogue with me, you should be truthful, not diplomatic. Don't try to please me. Try to enlighten yourself, and then I will be happy. You make a little critique of me as a person, and you make a little critique of my sect in Buddhism, which is Bajrayana Tantra. Therefore, what happened that after the totemic clan, there emerged cults around ethical teachers and magicians. Now, what is cult? I have given you the definition. Cult doesn't challenge the social structure. The defining feature of cult is that it does not, challenge the social structure, and it is not a threat, because cults are primarily interested in supernatural power and not interested in reforming or running the social structure or the state or the market. Are you getting the point? These are cults. Therefore, in the second stage, when cults emerged, nobody protested against them. Okay, then came the third stage, agricultural revolution, birth of cities, and widespread social unrest regarding distribution of wealth, status, and power. And there emerged legislator prophets like Zoroaster and Moses. Then the prophetic religions and the religious orthodoxy tried to suppress cults by force. They were murdered, killed, massacred. There is repression of the cults after the emergence of the world religions almost everywhere in the world. Outside India and China. You must have this rider. Because according to Max Weber and even other sociology of religion people, modern world religion did not emerge in India and China. What we find in India or China is a situation which is like prophets who can be called ethical teachers or exemplary prophets. Ethical prophets and exemplary prophets. They are not legislators. Are you getting the point? Therefore, both in India and China, the situation was very fluid. And the first world religion which emerged in this area was Buddhism. What they call Buddhism is the first world religion or first religion in the European sense of the term. Hinduism is a much later development. Are you getting the point? Hinduism as a religion emerged around 8th century AD after the advent of Adi Shankaracharya, when he wrote a book called Mathamanai. You must, Shankaracharya is a third-rate philosopher. And he eulogized by the Westerners for the wrong reason, because they wanted to colonize India. They said that Shankaracharya is like Immanuel Kant of Europe. No. Shankaracharya is like European prophets. In case you want to get Indian prophets among the Hindu, people, the first prophet is Shankaracharya, followed by Ramanujacharya, Vallabhacharya. These are prophets of, these are prophets of India who roughly resemble prophets of sociologists. Because Shankaracharya is a system builder. He is not a philosopher. As a philosopher, he is a third-rate philosopher, but he is a first-rate prophet, at par with Muhammad and Moses. And the book which should be read to understand his world religion is a book called Mathamanaya. It is a book which should be compared with 10 commandments of Moses and hadith of Prophet Muhammad. How the society should be regulated. And he is also a very important general of India. He made the first Hindu army. It is called Dasnami Sampradaya. Naga sannyasi of Dasnami Sampradaya are the Hindu army. Again, constituted by Shankaracharya. Therefore, it is not that they do not study Shankaracharya, but they study Shankaracharya as a philosopher and they overlook his work as a social reformer, as a prophet of the world religion. Are you getting the point? In the same way, Ramanujacharya, he should be compared again with, if not, because he is a critique of Shankaracharya. Therefore, you can say that they are like the three of them. You have Luther, you have Shankaracharya. You have Calvin, you have Ramanujacharya. You have Zwingli, you have Vallabhacharya. The three Acharya. Therefore, the term of prophet in India can be equated with Acharya and not Maharshis and Rishis, not with saints and gurus.